Hey folks, Pat here from DNS, and this Madison area fishing report is current as of September 13th. Well, don't actually have a lot of news stuff to talk about, but there has something that's sort of been on my mind lately. We get a lot of folks come through the shop, of course, some of them musky anglers, and I've been hearing from several of them that they think the numbers are down or they're having a slow year. And, some of that stuff is anecdotal, where maybe they're just not getting out as much as they thought they were, or, just having a bad day for them. But, it's something I hear enough of that I thought, maybe there's a way to look into this. And the first place I went was Capital City chapter of Muskies Inc., their website here. A lot of great information, and by the way, a great group. So if you are, especially if you're a muskie angler, I would encourage you to support them and join the group. You can learn a lot about what's going on around town, and of course, they're doing great stuff. But anyway, like a lot of groups, they publish a newsletter every month, and in that newsletter, they post kind of, I don't know if you call it a contest or what it is in the group, but where the standings are for people that are catching and releasing muskies around the chain. So looks like Jeff Lair is having a great year. It looks like you're at 25 muskies. And then you look at the other numbers, you're like, all right, yeah, those are some good numbers. People are catching fish. And, at first glance, it kind of looks good. But they also publish archives for their newsletters. And you can look here, at 2023. Thomas Lyon having, upper 20s, but, still kind of close. But if you look at the folks who are in the teens here, that list is a lot longer than was in 2023. And then the list of single digit folks is a lot longer than in 2024. So that's that. And then you look here on 2022, and you kind of see the same thing. Maybe not quite as much in the leader side of things, but still lots of teens in here. And then again, lots of single catches. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe the numbers are down a little bit, and this certainly isn't a scientific thing, but I don't know. I thought I'd look into it, and yeah, thought it was interesting, but and also get a chance to promote Capital City chapter of Muskies Inc. Great group of folks. Also, don't have a lot in the way of shop news, really. We're just kind of paring things down here, getting ready for ice, if you can believe that, on this hot day. Uh, Posters on the front door. Troy Farms having a bunch of stuff up the road. Good folks up there. Also a blood drive up the street here at the church. So yeah, not much fishing related activities going on out there, but it's after Labor Day, and that's just the way it goes. So as far as the report goes, it's been pretty dry with some beautiful weather to start the week, but things have gotten pretty warm the last few days. Looks like warm temps will stick around into next week and also continue dry. The Mendota buoy site is still down, unfortunately. I hope they get that up before we get closer to turnover here. I was chatting yesterday with Brian Zupke of Big B's Guide Service, and he had 72.5 degrees down on Wabisa. And a lot of other anglers I've been talking to up here on Mendota are saying right around that 70-degree mark, 70, 68, something like that, I've heard. So water temps are good out there. As far as water quality goes, of course, the county stopped doing the beach water quality reports, but the sun and heat we've had and no rain, that's been perfect conditions for algae blooms. So I've heard about several around Lake Mendota, University Bay, Brearley Bars, and some other spots. And I asked Brian about it. He said he was telling me about some very green water where he was fishing down in Wabisa. He says Keegan's really bad and Monona's bad in spots. So that's just a thing. But the fishing's good. I mean, most of that algae is just right on the surface, and it just looks and smells gross. The other thing affecting water quality has been the weed cutters and blowing weeds around, and they were up here on the north end of Lake Mendota here cutting weeds. And so I hear that shore anglers especially have been complaining about cut up weeds in that part of the lake. As far as tournaments go, I only know of one tournament on Lake Wabisa on Sunday, and it's pretty small. I think it's like 11 boats or something. But otherwise, generally around the chain, like I said, the recent heat brought on the algae, and the warmer temperatures seem to kind of tapered off or at least tempered the shift that fish seemed to be making last week into fall temps with the cooler temps we had last week. So, but folks are still definitely getting fish out there, great fishing, in fact. Generally speaking, although the weed lines are getting a little more difficult to find, they're still probably the best place to start looking for fish. Bluegill action around town continues to be good, but Brian says the bluegills have started to move shallower after the last cold snap we had, and he's been finding them in around 10 feet of water and less on weed edges, but also right in the weeds. Same thing on Lake Monona, but out there, of course, you have the suspended gills that are still suspended out there. He says about 10 feet down, out over deeper water. A small jig tipped with a piece of redworm, spike, or a waxworm is really all you need for gills anywhere on the chain this time of year. Crappies continue to be elusive around the chain, but are being found on weed edges and near structure. Crappie minnows or a minnow-shaped plastic on a small jig head is a pretty safe bet for those fish. Unfortunately, other than a few reports here and there, I still am not hearing really anything in the way of perch around town. It's very weird. Bass have been in a good mood around the chain. Largemouth are up shallow for the most part, and lots of things work well for them this time of year. But with the weed lines or weeds being thick in many places, weedless rig plastics and swim jigs are good options. And of course, the topwater frog bite continues to be good. Some smallmouth are mostly being found on weed lines, especially near rocky shoreline breaks in 10 to 20 feet of water. Although I am hearing about some fish up as shallow as 5 feet in rocky, weedy areas, with some walleye mixed in those areas, depending on the day. So, in addition to rocky weed lines, walleyes are also being found on mid-lake humps in good numbers in 10 to 20 feet of water and deeper on hot, sunny days. Half crawler on or a large fathead on a jig or a drop shots have been working well for folks. But that's not to say folks aren't getting plenty of fish trolling crankbaits and crawler harnesses. And of course, when the walleye move up shallow at night to feed, jerk and swim baits are great options. And while you're casting, why not just throw out a lighted bobber with a large fathead and kind of cover all your bases there. Um, I've been hearing about a couple nice muskie being caught here and there, but like I said, it sounds like the numbers may be down just a little bit, and but that fishing should improve when things cool down here, if they cool down. It's gonna be warm all next week. Pike are plentiful and will grab just about anything. Area rivers and streams are flowing at or just below their seasonal averages for this time of year. Up here on the north side, Cherokee Marsh, still very weedy up there, but the weeds do seem like they're coming down. I drove by the other day and there were some pockets opening up, and I have heard about some folks getting some bass and pike up there. If you got a small watercraft, as always, you can launch here at the school road launch, get out in the main channel and have more weed-free fishing out there. The 113 bridge, every now and then I hear about a nice cat coming out of there, but the nice cats are just out roaming around. I heard about one way up in Cherokee last week. I heard about several down in the lake. So, but it is a nice spot for a mixed bag of fish. That current draws fish in. You never really know what you'll find. I've been hearing about some white bass up there, largemouth, and some smaller northern. On Lake Mendota itself, like I said, the cats have dispersed out into the main lake. Been hearing some reports off Warner Breakwall, Tenney Breakwall. I think I had one out of Marshall Park, the Marshall Lagoon the other day. So yeah, they're just all over out there. But as far as other fish on Mendota go, the bluegills are, for the most part, can be found on outside weed edges, but also they're being found on mid-lake humps, like Dunn's Bar, Second Point, Commodore Bar, Brearley Bars, stuff like that, but also just weed edges around the lake. If you can find a good weed edge, you're likely going to find all kinds of different kinds of fish. Crappies are being picked up on weed edges as well, and while I don't hear about a lot of them, the size structure continues to be great. Like I mentioned, not much for perch reports that I've heard. Weed lines on the west end over here have been the best bet that I've heard of, and that really isn't much. It sounds like maybe 8 to 12 feet of water on this west end. If you can find a weed edge, that's great. Redworms have been working well for folks, but size continues to be an issue. It's just not a lot of big perch out there, but some good numbers if you can get into them. Otherwise, walleyes are on the chain. Like I said in the intro, mixed in some of these shallow areas, in rocky areas where you might normally find smallmouth. They're also finding walleyes mixed in, but also on mid-lakes humps with the bluegills mixed in out there. Dunn's Bar, Brearley Bar, Second Point. Speaking of Second Point, there was something going on over here all this week. There's been some boats over there. I haven't heard any reports, but something's happening over there. And I guess as far as walleyes, two night spots as they start to move in shallow, or as they move in shallow at night. The University Shoreline down here, Tenney Park Breakwall, and the Warner Park Breakwall are all good spots for those fish. Speaking of Tenney Park Breakwall, it's been producing a really nice mixed bag of fish all summer, really, but some nice bass and some pike. You never know what you'll get down there. Over here to the lock and dam, it's been spotty below there. In the lagoon, lots of small bluegills, a good bass population, and some carp cruising around if that's your thing. Good action in the river, especially during these hot days under the bridges there. On Lake Monona, pretty much the same thing as Lake Mendota as far as gills go. You find them on weed edges, like Brian was saying, up shallower now, so maybe look at 10 feet of water and even less there. Look for weed pockets too are good spots. But other places where I know they're getting gills are over here off the Monona Terrace wall still. Good gill action during the day with some crappies coming in there sometimes at night. Walleyes also sometimes coming into this, Monona Terrace, John Nolan area at night. The Brittingham Bay area on Monona Bay, Brittingham Park, have been producing some good bluegills all summer. Although the water down there is pretty green, from what I last heard. Lake Wingara, it's a weedy mess, but if you can get through the weeds, you can find good panfish action, but those fish are small. Good largemouth bass in there. and muskies, but they run a little bit on the smaller side. And like I said about the muskies in the intro, I hear about a few fish here and there, but a lot of folks saying that they feel like the numbers are down. But yeah, the bluegills remain the star on Lake Monona. Find them on weed edges. Find them out still suspended over the main lake basin, about 10 feet down. It seems like I've been hearing about a better concentration of fish, maybe down in this kind of southeast end of the lake. We're talking Turtle Bay, Weechawak Bay, maybe up here, Wild Haven and Winnequa areas. So anyway, that's just seems like that's where a lot of reports I hear come off of. Upper Mud, Brian was saying there's fish in the dredge hole and suspended over the dredge hole about 10 feet down there as well. Wabisas and this largemouth bass on Upper Mud. Good largemouth bass population in there. Good largemouth bass around Lake Farm Park. Anywhere on Wabisa, you're likely going to find gills if you can find a weed edge, but also, again, pushing up into those weeds is where the fish sound like they're moving now. Walleye action, I heard about a little bit near Hog Island, but Brian was actually fishing or filming a show after when he talked to me. He had just got done filming a show with Larry Smith, and they were on Lake Wabisa catching walleyes. And they were down here kind of on this southeast shoreline, I guess you'd say. Yeah, so I guess that's all I know about Wabisa. Kiganza, still is Kiganza. I don't hear a ton of reports. I have heard some good action coming out over here on kind of this east end of the lake, southeast end of the lake, weed lines. And if you're looking for walleyes, Williams Point and the state park areas got some good structure there. Kashkanang, I haven't heard a ton out of there, although I have heard about some fish coming out of the Black Hawk Island area up here, and then down here on the south end of the lake too, down by the bridges down there has been productive. Otherwise, I'm hearing about a good mixed bag of fish at the Indian Fort Dam, and then upstream here too at the Jefferson Dam, some good white bass and occasional good catfish action in there as well. Then we're back. So, yeah, Rock River's been fishing well after being high for a very long time. Still hearing about cats up here in Beaver Dam, not much else. And over here, Devil's Lake, heard about some trout over there, suspended. Otherwise, down on the river, the river's actually running a little low right now, from even compared to seasonal averages. I drove over it over the weekend, and there's a lot of sand out there. But what the nice thing about that is it sort of concentrates fish in areas. So as you're going up the river, if you're smallmouth fishing or really fishing for anything, look to the backsides of sandbars, deeper corners, shoreline structures, stuff like that. Otherwise, the dams have all been producing good fish. Good sturgeon action at all the dams. So sturgeon season is open until the end of the month. Folks using gobs of worms or like a cut bait has also been effective for folks. But yeah, nice mixed bag. Also been hearing about some good white bass action at all the dams up and down the river. Up on Lake Wisconsin, haven't heard much specifically out of there. There was a good smallmouth bite going on for bass up there. Otherwise, all the flowage is up and down the river. Pretty much the same thing. Folks are trolling, looking for walleyes, jigging for walleyes, and catching some walleyes, but also catching a lot of sheepshead and white bass from what I hear. But like I said, too, all the other dams, Castle Rock Dam, Petenwell Dam, and the other spots, like that, are all good producers around the chain. Otherwise, over on the Mississippi River, haven't heard a ton of reports come through the shop, but I know action at the dams themselves have been good. But the wing dams, too, have been holding some nice walleyes in current seams. And then over here to the East Coast, over to Milwaukee, good smallmouth bass and pike action in the Milwaukee River and some of the other tribs. That's about to change as soon as the salmon start to push in. They're in the harbors right now. I heard they're being pretty tight-lipped from what I read online and folks I know that fish over there. But those fish will start to move up the rivers pretty soon, and they will be kicking the smallmouth and the pike out of there at least till next spring, probably. I don't know where they go. But as far as trout fishing goes around the chain, it's been good. The temperatures have been good. These cooler nights help keep the water cold. Folks are getting, I'm hearing good numbers of fish. If you're fishing spinning gear, Rapala countdowns, crappie tube jigs, small spinners, and spoons are all safe bets. If you want to toss meat, it's hard beating a redworm drifted through a run and tail out. Otherwise, on the fly side of things, I was out this weekend for did a little camping with my family. We did catch some mayfly hatches early in the morning and in the evenings, but nothing during the day. It was bright and sunny. You can run mayfly nymphs and woolly buggers through runs if you want to fish subsurface, but otherwise, this is really terrestrial season. So foam ants, beetles, crickets, and grasshoppers are all awesome. this time of year. And but saying that, I will say that we were out with I was out with my son, and I had a couple of tough days with terrestrials. I certainly caught fish, but one day I noticed that there were trout jumping out of the water chasing damselflies, and this has happened to me before. And this as part of our Happy Fly Day feature, I've got these foamed damselflies that work well, and it's not something you see every day. But when the damselflies are flying low to the water, and the trout just tend to key in on them, you'll see trout jump right out of the water to try to grab these flies. So swing by the shop, pick some of these up, have them in case you run into that like I did. Otherwise, yeah, grasshoppers and that are all working well. Um, I guess that pretty much does it for the report. If you want to post your comments and catches below, we always love seeing that. Feel free to call the shop at 241-4225 if you want me to expand on anything we've talked about here. Otherwise, I do thank you for tuning in. I wish you luck out there, and we will talk to you next week. Take care.